Thom Hartmann here with you. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. It's Middays with Mark. Congressman, I see that the whole PAYGO thing is still exploding. It's at the top of Common Dreams. It's all over Twitter. Just as a public service here, could you very, very quickly restate what the heck is going on here and why? Apparently it was Ocasio-Cortez and Ro Khanna who started this stampede, or at least they're the ones at the top of the New York Times on it. What did they miss? What did they get wrong?
So what's happening is someone in the Senate kind of put out that the rules, the issue, and they don't understand how the House rules work versus the Senate rules. So let me read you the statement that Pramila, Jayapal, and I are putting out at this moment. We've been concerned about PAYGO for months. They've had numerous conversations with Rules Chairman Jim McGovern and House leadership about those concerns. We all agree that the real problem with PAYGO exists in the statute that requires it. That is why we'll be introducing legislation in the 116th Congress to end PAYGO. In the meantime, Chairman McGovern and House leadership has committed to us that PAYGO will not be an impediment to advancing key progressive priorities in the 116th Congress. With the assurances that PAYGO can be waived, we do plan to vote for the House rules package and proceed with the legislation to fix the statute. The real problem, and that's the end of the statement, is the statute. And if we don't have it in rules, the law, which is, in statute. The problem in the rules part, if we don't have it in rules, we give up our ability to waive it. We give up our ability to use it if we ever would use it, which, again, it's not being used to stop progressive policies. If you don't have it in there, the ability to find the money for anything that would pass would go to the Senate and the President. The Senate's under Republican control, as is the White House. So we kind of have to keep it in there to have prerogative still on it. It's a bad policy. Cut-go is even worse, where you could only cut to fund something. PAYGO says you could raise taxes or cut. We're saying you shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to put good ideas out there and would have other ways of dealing with the revenue side or the how to find the revenue for it, whether it be cuts or otherwise. But you don't need a prescriptive law for it. Again, the rule doesn't do that. It's in statute. And until it's out of statute, you have the problem. If you don't have it in a rule, you take away the House Democrats' ability to waive or to enact it as necessary.
Right. And for people who don't recognize that word, statute means it's the law of the land.
It's
a law.
Correct.
It was passed by
and
Congress.
We can't change the law in a rule. A rule is a separate process.
Right, right. Got it. Deacon in Boulder Creek, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Congressman.
Hi, Deacon.
I'm afraid this court's set to overturn the exclusionary rule. And that will make the Fourth Amendment meaningless. Before that rule, cops searched anybody they wanted to, anytime they wanted to. Democrats got to do something about this Supreme Court, or we're headed for a police state.
The exclusionary rule being the one that evidence that's seized during criminal behavior on the part of the police can't be used against the person that evidence was gathered against, right, Deacon?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, Congressman?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I missed the question. I apologize.
He said he's concerned that the Supreme Court may be fixing to blow up the exclusionary rule, and he's very concerned that if Democrats don't do something about the Supreme Court right now, that we could end up in a police state.
Gotcha. Yeah, unfortunately, with having just the House alone, we're not able to do a whole lot about the Supreme Court right now. I mean, the Senate still has the oversight as far as the nominations. And hopefully we won't have any nominations coming up very soon because, we know some of the folks that are in line could be good progressive voices. So I don't have a great answer for you, Deacon, because just having the House alone isn't enough to fully impact the Supreme Court.
Michael in Wheaton, Illinois. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Tom. Hey, Congressman. Thanks for taking my call, guys. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I want to talk about the student loan issue. So I'm a 33-year-old millennial who went to school, got my bachelor's degree. I make about $60,000 a year, and I have to live at home with my parents because I'm spending $1,000 a month in my student loan debt. And to me, that's just nuts. So my question, Congressman, is, what can we do about all of us who went to school and played by the rules, and now we're stuck with all this debt?
Yeah. So can I ask what your interest rate is, Michael? Do you know offhand?
I just dropped him. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I mean, one, most immediately, there's a bill that we introduced back in 2013, the first in the nation, and then later Senator Warren and Senator Gillibrand each introduced a version for refinancing of student debt. That's one thing for people with existing debt. Some people have like 6.6% interest when that's clearly not the interest rate right now. You can refinance your house, your car, but you can't your student debt easily. There's some ways to consolidate, but it's not necessarily an easy process. So that's one way you could do it. There's other ways that we have loan repayment for people in public service jobs. In other areas, there's also bigger ways to look at how we're funding education with it going this expensive. Can we deal with it up front? And that's where I think some of the new bills that we've put out there, the debt-free college bill and some of the other bills that are out there, are trying to deal with it up front, so you don't have to deal with this problem later. The average person leaving, like the University of Wisconsin, a great public institution, is close to $30,000 right now. If you go to grad school, you can get into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Private schools, the same. So there are a few measures that have been introduced previously. I think you're going to see more new ideas come out this session, but it's absolutely on top of mind for everyone. And we also have to reauthorize the Higher Education Act, and that might give us some opportunities to do it as well.
Ken in Great Falls, Montana, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. Now, please keep your mind open for a sec. I'm coming from this with the aspect that the wall is a stupid idea, but the Democrats ought to give it to Trump. We ought to give him a green wall covered in solar panels, and then the infrastructure to get the electricity up to this grid system. You could build more solar farms. Within a couple of years, you could shut down 15, maybe 20 coal-fired power plants. The electricity would pay for that part of the wall, and Trump would sign on. He's already signed on to solar panels on the wall, but really make it a big project. You could start the Green New Deal right now instead of waiting until 2020. Please look into this.
Yeah, I hear you, Ken. I know you brought this issue up before. I just don't think a good trade-off is having a giant wall at our southern border, even if it has solar panels. That's not enough to convince me. I think, what convinces me are the numbers, the net migration in the last decade we've had, the fact that, drugs mainly come in through ports of entry, not across the border. All the facts fly in the face of having a wall. So I think we've been very hard on saying we're not going to put that money out there for a wall, but we will do other border protections, other more modern ways of dealing with border protections, not like the Great Wall of China. There's a lot of new technology since then that you can do and still have the same impact. Yet I also agree with you. I have 8.5 kilowatts of solar on our house here in Wisconsin. It's a great way. We need to have more jobs right here in America on solar and wind and biomass and other ways to create fuel. So I think we can do it sooner than 2020. I think the idea was by, I think it was 2021, it might be actually in the new Green Deal, you could fully go to 100%. I think that was the idea behind it. That's why it might take longer. But right now, we can invest in things that incentivize solar and wind and other renewable technologies.
Mark in Jefferson City, Missouri, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you for taking my call. Congressman, I think I had just briefly heard you mention in the conversation of student loan debt. Did I hear you mention something about apprenticeships? Because I'd really love to hear you expand upon that, because I'm blue collar, and over the years it seems like a part of the base that the Democrat Party has lost, some sort of apprenticeship type program done through the government to help avoid this student debt to start out with would just be politically very beneficial for the Democrat Party and
Democratic Party, Mark.
Except a lot of them that they left. Could I hear you expand upon that, please?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. So the Democratic Party, especially in the House, people like Rosa DeLauro, myself, others who sit on either the Appropriations Committee for Labor, Human Services, and Education, or the Standing Committee, which starting tomorrow will be Education and Labor again instead of Education and Workforce. We've had a number of bills introduced to deal with registered apprenticeships, so real professional apprenticeships. And, if people can get a higher skill through apprenticeships, you can get better wages for your family. Only 30% of people are going to get a 4-year degree. So what about the other 70%? And we're very high on that. I've had a bill introduced, as well as other people, to try to expand the use of registered apprenticeships, and we couldn't get it through a Republican Congress. Instead, there's been some unregistered apprenticeship talk, which is actually, they're not very good. They're kind of ways that take advantage of people to get the skills, as opposed to a professional registered one like you have most unions offer. So you will definitely see action this session from Democrats on apprenticeship bills that'll make it easier for people to get good skills, to get good paying jobs.
Wonderful. Bryce in Glendale, California, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman. I'm short and quick, but basically I voted for Trump in 2016 based on the premise of what he said he was going to offer universal health care coverage for everybody that everybody could afford. And he turned his back and tried to work with Republicans and tried to kill the Affordable Care Act. And that's basically already a bad policy as it is, but it would just make it worse.
Yeah, so you're concerned. I mean, clearly, that was one of the things he said in order to get elected and didn't deliver. In fact, just the opposite. Not only did he not deliver, he worked actively against access via his attacks on the Affordable Care Act and other measures he did. One of the things I think, we can do is, one, we've got to shore up the ACA right now because there are some issues with the death by 1,000 cuts that happened in the last several years from Republicans. But then many of us would rather be aspirational and look at Medicare for all. Canada is not a third world country. Most of Europe is not a third world country. There are really great ways to make sure that every single citizen could have access to health care, and we need to fight for that as the ultimate goal.
Representative Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour on Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. It's Wednesday. Congressman Pocan taking your calls. His Twitter handle is Rep Mark Pocan, as in Representative Mark Pocan. His website is pocan.house.gov. We'll be right back with more of your calls for the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus.